In March of 1927, during the renovation of San Francisco's old Hall of Justice on Kearny Street, a work crew uncovered a locked steel vault sealed behind 2 layers of brick. The vault bore no registry in city records. Inside, archivists found 12 water-damaged folders, each labeled with a man's full name, and each marked "Deceased, 1895. Every name belonged to a millionaire. Every man had been a member of the same private society. Yet in municipal archives, no trace of that society could be found. Not in club registries, not in newspaper listings, not even in the social columns that documented every notable dinner from Nob Hill to Pacific Heights. But beneath the folders lay something stranger. A bound volume wrapped in black silk, its cover impressed with faint gold letters, The Golden Gate Supper Club, 1889 to 1894. Its pages contained minutes of meetings, meticulously recorded menus, and in the margins, coded annotations resembling medical formulas and Chinese characters. Within days, the vault was resealed by order of the district attorney's office. The surviving notes were filed under civic associations, suppressed. What authorities found next would haunt San Francisco for generations to come. Before we continue with the secret history of the Golden Gate Supper Club and the 12 men who dined their way to death, take a moment to subscribe and ring the bell. Comment where you're listening from. And now let's travel back to the winter of 1885, when vengeance first took root. In March of 1927, during the renovation of San Francisco's old Hall of Justice on Kearny Street, a work crew uncovered a locked steel vault sealed behind 2 layers of brick. The vault bore no registry in city records. Inside, archivists found 12 water-damaged folders, each labeled with a man's full name, and each marked "Deceased, 1895. Every name belonged to a millionaire. Every man had been a member of the same private society. Yet in municipal archives, no trace of that society could be found. Not in club registries, not in newspaper listings, not even in the social columns that documented every notable dinner from Nob Hill to Pacific Heights. Beneath the folders lay something stranger, a bound volume wrapped in black silk, its cover impressed with faint gold letters, The Golden Gate Supper Club, 1889 to 1894. Its pages contained minutes of meetings, meticulously recorded menus, and in the margins, coded annotations resembling medical formulas and Chinese characters. Within days, the vault was resealed by order of the district attorney's office. The surviving notes were filed under civic associations, suppressed. What authorities found next would haunt San Francisco for generations to come. Before we continue with the secret history of the Golden Gate Supper Club and the 12 men who dined their way to death, take a moment to subscribe and ring the bell. Comment where you're listening from. And now, let's travel back to the winter of 1885, when vengeance first took root. At the edge of the Wyoming plains, where the wind carries more dust than memory, stood a settlement called Rock Springs, a company town carved from coal and contradiction. By the summer of 1885, it was home to roughly 600 white miners and 300 Chinese laborers, all employed by the Union Pacific Coal Department. The town was built for extraction, not of coal alone, but of men. Very clapboard house. Every store, every lamp that flickered in the night belonged to the company. Pay came not in currency but in script, redeemable only at the company store. Wages were divided by race, rights by color. The white miners lived in frame houses on the northern ridge, close to the rail lines and saloons. The Chinese lived to the south, along Bitter Creek, in a labyrinth of wooden shacks known as Chinatown. There the air smelled of lamp oil and boiled rice, of coal smoke and exile. No law existed that did not serve the company, and no church sermon dared to speak of the labor that kept its pews warm. Among the Chinese miners were 5 men who had learned to survive silence. Lin Wei, aged 32, once served as foreman in the mines of Guangdong before famine drove him west. His voice was calm, deliberate, a man who had learned that authority is safest when disguised as obedience. Chen Huang, a physician from Nanjing, carried his father's surgical instruments in a lacquered box across the Pacific. He was educated, soft-spoken, and haunted by the memory of dissecting corpses during the Taiping Rebellion. Jiang Min, merchant and opportunist, sold imported teas, carved ivory, and fragments of silk. He was the only one who spoke English fluently, and therefore the one most often insulted to his face. Wu Jian, an engineer from Canton, had designed steam pumps before finding himself shoveling coal for half pay. His notebooks, written in neat columns, contained sketches of tunnels and bridges, and chemical formulas the company would later call dangerous knowledge. Liu Feng, the youngest at 24, had once taught poetry at a mission school. He believed that education was the only weapon stronger than violence, a belief that would be tested and broken before the year was out. They met each evening in a corner of the Chinese Quarter, speaking in low tones over rice wine and bitter tea, discussing wages, tunnel safety, and the rising anger among the white miners who accused them of stealing work. They did not yet know they were living their last peaceful season. Tension had been building for years. Union Pacific's white miners, mostly Welsh and Irish immigrants, demanded higher pay and shorter hours. When the company refused, they struck, and the company, eager to break them, brought in Chinese laborers willing to work for less. The newspapers of the day, the Cheyenne Daily Leader, the Salt Lake Tribune, called the Chinese a pestilence upon honest labor. Political speeches in Laramie and Green River promised to cleanse the minds of the Oriental scourge. By August 1885, mobs had already formed in nearby towns. The Wyoming territorial governor warned of violence. The company denied any danger. But deep underground, in the airless tunnels lit by oil lamps, white and Chinese miners shared the same risk and the same silence. And silence is a dangerous thing when resentment grows unchecked. At dawn on September 2nd, 1885, a dispute broke out in mine number 6, over a coal seam, a pickaxe, or perhaps a slur. Witnesses later disagreed. By noon, the white miners left their shafts and gathered above ground, armed with rifles, pistols, and clubs. They moved downhill toward Chinatown. Lin Wei was in the tunnels when he heard the first shots. By the time he reached the surface, smoke was already rising. He saw men he had shared food with, setting fire to the shacks. Chen Huang ran toward the wounded, trying to carry them to safety, but bullets followed the sound of his voice. Jiang Min's store was looted, its ivory smashed to powder. Wu Jian saw his plans and notebooks thrown into the flames. Liu Feng found his students, 2 boys of 12, hiding beneath a collapsed roof. He led them to the creek and into the reeds, where they watched the town burn. For 2 hours, the mob slaughtered without interference. 28 Chinese miners were killed, 15 more were wounded, 79 homes were burned to ash. The Union Pacific agents who arrived that evening wrote in their report, "Order restored, losses limited to Chinese Quarter." No arrests were made. The survivors, those who had not fled into the hills, were herded into freight cars and evacuated for their safety. Lin Wei and the others watched through the slats as their world disappeared in smoke. The governor declared the riot unfortunate. The company declared itself blameless. Compensation was promised, then withdrawn. Days later, white miners returned to work at higher wages. The massacre achieved its purpose. But for the 5, something else was born that day. Not hatred, but precision. They met again in secret, in the burned shell of Jiang Min's shop. Around them lay the remains of their dead, broken pottery, melted coins, the twisted metal of a teapot. Lin Wei spoke first. "They wrote our names on ledgers," he said. "Let us write theirs." Chen Huang took from his pocket a small notebook, the kind doctors used for symptoms and cures. On the first page, he wrote 12 names. Names of men who had profited most from the massacre, the railroad barons, the bankers, the men who had ordered the company to resolve the Chinese question. He wrote beneath them a single phrase in English: "The Dinner Club." They traveled west in silence. Freight cars carried them through the snow-covered plains to the edge of the Pacific, where the smoke of Rock Springs seemed to follow in their wake. San Francisco, the gateway to the Orient, welcomed them with the same duplicity as Wyoming, a city of opportunity built on exclusion. By 1885, Chinatown spanned 12 crowded blocks bounded by Kearny and Stockton streets. It was both refuge and prison. The newly passed Chinese Exclusion Act forbade new immigration and denied citizenship to those already present. White newspapers called it the Celeste Isle Ghetto. Beyond Chinatown, the city glittered with the wealth of railroad empires, Nob Hill mansions, marble banks, and the New Palace Hotel, where the nation's industrial elite dined beneath crystal chandeliers. Here, the five men saw their enemies living in comfort, their fortunes untouched by the blood spilled in Wyoming. Lin Wei took a position as a servant in one of those mansions, polishing the silver of the same class that had burned his people alive. Chen Huang, denied a medical license, became assistant to an American physician who treated the city's elite. Jiang Min reopened his curio shop near Clay Street, selling authentic Oriental artifacts to men who could not pronounce his name. Wu Jian found work designing ventilation systems for the Southern Pacific Railroad. Liu Feng, fluent in English and mathematics, became tutor to the children of bankers, teaching the heirs of murderers how to read poetry. They did not forget. They observed. They listened. Each name in Chen Huang's notebook would one day receive an invitation. No court records document the private meetings that followed, but fragments survive. A rent ledger from a mansion on Bush Street, receipts for imported porcelain, coded telegrams referencing banquets. These artifacts suggest that between 1886 and 1888, a secret society took root within San Francisco's highest social circles, one that presented itself as an elite dining club, yet whose founding purpose was retribution. The city, intoxicated by its own progress, never suspected that among its most polite gatherings sat men whose ancestors they had buried without ceremony. What began as survival in Rock Springs would evolve into methodical revenge in San Francisco, a campaign executed not with bullets but with silverware. By 1886, San Francisco had become the most gilded city west of the Mississippi. The hills glittered with gaslight and champagne, with the sound of carriage wheels striking cobblestone like the ticking of a jeweled clock. Nob Hill was its crown, a ridge of marble mansions belonging to the railroad barons who had carved their fortunes from the backs of laborers they would never name. From the bay to the Presidio, the city seemed untouchable, a monument to money and myth. In the alleyways below, life for the Chinese remained a life in parentheses. The Exclusion Act had transformed every man into a suspect, every woman into a threat. The police called it the Oriental Quarter, a phrase that sounded elegant in reports and poisonous in practice. White journalists described it as a maze of sin and smoke, though most had never set foot inside. Within its crowded rooms lived the displaced, the invisible, the ones history does not bother to remember. It was there, behind beaded curtains and red paper lanterns, that five men began to construct a new identity, not of victims, but of visionaries. Lin Wei worked quietly as a household servant in the mansion of Elias Lockwood, a shipping magnate whose fortune was bound to the same Union Pacific contracts that had financed Rock Springs. Lin polished the silver, trimmed cigars, poured wine, and listened. Servants, after all, are the unseen historians of the wealthy. From dinner conversations, he learned of shares traded, shipments ordered, and dinners planned. Every word was a thread, and Lin was patient enough to weave them into a web. Chen Huang, barred by law from practicing medicine, became assistant to Dr. Charles R. Fenton, physician to the city's industrial elite. He learned their ailments and their habits: gout, insomnia, a fondness for brandy before bed. Fenton's patients confided in him, believing their secrets safe, in medical confidence. Chen wrote each one down, quietly building a catalogue of corruption and fear. Jiang Min's curio shop became a fashionable stop for the wives of Nob Hill magnates. Inside he sold porcelain bowls, carved jade figurines, and scrolls depicting ancient feasts. The irony was not lost on him. He spoke politely, wrapped purchases with care, and listened to the gossip of women who never imagined the shopkeeper might understand their English. More than once they spoke of their husbands' gentlemen's clubs, the Bohemian, the Pacific, the Occidental, places where deals were made and lives were bought. Wu Jian's employment brought him close to the machines of empire. As a draftsman for the Southern Pacific Railroad, he repaired the ventilation systems that cooled the city's tunnels and warehouses. His knowledge of airflow and pressure would later serve a darker purpose. He was an engineer once more, but his blueprints now extended beyond steel and steam, toward revenge. And Liu Feng, with his gentle voice and immaculate manners, taught literature and mathematics to the children of men who had financed massacre. In his pupils' homework, he corrected spelling errors beside ledgers of profit and loss. He was the least suspected, and therefore the most dangerous. In his evenings, he translated their lessons into codes that his friends could read. Their first year in San Francisco was one of observation. The second was of planning. In 1887, they gathered in the back room of Jiang Min's shop, behind a screen painted with dragons. They spoke in whispers, the air thick with the scent of sandalwood and ink. They dine together, Lin Wei said, and they believe themselves immortal while they eat. Jiang Min poured tea, his hand steady. Then that is where we will meet them, around their tables. The idea was audacious, yet simple. To destroy men of power, one must offer them a greater power. Exclusivity. No weapon disarms arrogance faster than flattery. Thus was born the design of the Golden Gate Supper Club. The concept was not merely a club, but a performance. Invitations would be rare, hand-delivered, each sealed in crimson wax and inscribed in gold leaf. The message would imply a society above societies, an order for those whose vision transcends commerce. The words were crafted by Liu Feng, the calligraphy by Lin Wei, the printing arranged through a sympathetic worker at a Mission District press. For the illusion of grandeur, they needed a stage. Jiang Min found it, a mansion on Bush Street that had been vacant since its owner's death. Its windows faced west toward the bay. Its walls were thick with silence. They rented it under a false name, the Oriental Mercantile Association, and filled it with what they could not afford. Red silk, porcelain vases, polished rosewood, and tapestries bought at auction for pennies. The decor was not Chinese so much as what the wealthy imagined China to be, exotic, mysterious, faintly dangerous. They borrowed from their oppressors' fantasies to bait their pride. Each man assumed a role. Lin Wei, with his calm authority, would be master of ceremonies. Chen Huang would serve as cultural consultant, explaining the medicinal philosophy behind each dish. Jiang Min would cook, a skill he had learned from his mother and refined into an art. Wu Jian would handle logistics, lighting and security, ensuring each dinner remained secret and precise. Liu Feng would provide the entertainment, poetry, music and conversation designed to lull suspicion. By late 1888, their preparations were complete. The first invitations were written. The recipients were carefully chosen, 12 men whose fortunes had grown after the Rock Springs Massacre, superintendents, investors, and bankers. Their names corresponded perfectly to those recorded in Chen Huang's black notebook. The letters arrived on crimson paper embossed with a gold seal depicting the Golden Gate Bridge, a structure not yet built, but already symbolic in the city's imagination. Each message was signed only by invitation of the founders. The response was immediate and predictable. Curiosity among the city's elite spread like perfume through a ballroom. Newspapers speculated about the mysterious new club that counted magnates among its rumored members. Some said it was an extension of the Bohemian Club. Others whispered it was a secret society of Eastern diplomats. None guessed the truth. The first dinner took place in the spring of 1889. 12 guests arrived in carriages and hansom cabs, their coats glistening with fog. The mansion's windows burned with amber light. Inside, candles flickered against red draperies. The air smelled of spice and jasmine. The guests were greeted by Lin Wei in formal Western dress. He bowed, speaking perfect English, offering each man a glass of plum wine infused with ginseng. "Welcome, gentlemen," he said softly. Tonight you dine where few ever shall. The table gleamed with gold-edged china. At each setting lay a name card written in calligraphy, its ink still glistening. Chen Huang described each course with practiced eloquence, speaking of ancient dynasties and balance between elements, heat and cold, bitterness and sweetness, life and death. The meal unfolded as a spectacle of control. There were dumplings filled with crab and ginger, duck lacquered with honey, sea cucumber in rich broth. Between courses, Liu Feng recited verses from Li Bai and translated them into English. We drink to forget, yet the ghosts remember. The guests applauded politely, unaware of how closely the ghosts were listening. That night, as carriages rolled away into the mist, Lin Wei and his companions sat in silence. The first act of their revenge had begun. Over the next months, the legend of the Golden Gate Supper Club grew. Men boasted of invitations as though they were royal decrees. Membership was said to be limited to 12, attendance compulsory. Those who missed a dinner were never invited again. And then, quietly, deaths began. James Whitmore, superintendent of the Rock Springs mines, was found dead in his home 6 months later. The physician attributed it to heart failure. At the coroner's inquest, a servant recalled he had attended some private supper, all very grand. There were no further questions. What no one knew was that during the last dinner he attended, Lin Wei himself had filled Whitmore's glass. The wine had been laced with aconite, a toxin derived from monkshood, Chen Huang's choice. Its taste was masked by the plum sweetness. Its effects began hours later. Whitmore died in his sleep, clutching his chest. The city mourned a respected businessman. The newspapers printed kind words. But in a rented mansion on Bush Street, 5 men lit incense for the 28 dead of Rock Springs. The cycle had begun. By 1890, 2 more deaths followed, each different, each subtle. A banker succumbed to a sudden fever. A railroad agent collapsed after dinner, diagnosed with apoplexy. Every victim had attended the supper club. None suspected the connection. The police found no pattern, and the press found no scandal worth printing. Meanwhile, the invitations continued. The legend deepened. The dinners became increasingly opulent. 12 courses, imported wines, musicians hidden behind screens. The guests felt chosen, blessed, above the city's vulgar masses. They laughed beneath lanterns shaped like dragons, toasting to progress while sipping from poisoned cups. To outsiders, the club did not exist. To its members, it was a symbol of status. To its founders, it was justice dressed in silk. Years later, when the hidden vault was opened beneath the Hall of Justice, archivists would find traces of these evenings, menus pressed between ledgers, ink-stained minutes detailing toasts and courses. One page bore a smudge of red wine that, under magnification, was found not to be wine at all. In those dinners, luxury became the instrument of vengeance. Each act of cruelty from the past was answered with a dish, a story, and a death. The men who had burned the miners of Rock Springs now dined in candlelight, unaware that the same precision they had once used to measure profit was now measuring their pulse. They had created a world built on silence, and silence was what killed them. By the spring of 1891, the Golden Gate Supper Club had settled into its rhythm. Each dinner was meticulously orchestrated, each guest carefully monitored. The mansion on Bush Street was transformed into a stage of subtle terror, its red silks and golden embroidery now symbols not just of wealth, but of imminent reckoning. The guests, oblivious to the danger, praised the club's exclusivity. They laughed at delicate jokes, toasted to imagined camaraderie, and speculated about the mysterious founders who seemed to know their habits better than anyone else. The 5 men, Lin Wei, Chen Huang, Jiang Min, Wu Jian, and Liu Feng, moved through the mansion like silent conductors of a symphony whose music was fatal. Lin Wei, as master of ceremonies, oversaw every detail, from the positioning of the chairs to the exact angle of the candlelight. Chen Huang, the cultural consultant, described the medicinal properties of each ingredient, noting in his journal which toxins were subtly incorporated into the dishes. Jiang Min prepared each meal with a surgeon's precision, masking aconite, hemlock, and other poisons within the exotic recipes he had learned from home. Wu Jian ensured that no servant, no delivery, no lantern flicker could betray their plan. Liu Feng provided entertainment and conversation, his poetry and music serving to disarm suspicion, to lull the men into a false sense of security. The first target, James Whitmore, had already succumbed. Following him, 2 railroad executives fell over the next year, each death seemingly unrelated, one heart failure, the other a sudden fever. The press reported nothing more than natural causes. Each man was buried quietly, his family unaware of the silent vengeance exacted upon him. The 5 men, however, documented everything. Chen Huang kept journals detailing the symptoms, doses, and timelines. Lin Wei sketched seating arrangements, noting which course corresponded with which victim. Each entry was meticulous, each action deliberate. Justice was not chaos. It was methodical, surgical, and exacting. By mid-1892, the pattern began to emerge in subtle ways. Observant city officials and a few journalists noted coincidences. All victims had attended exclusive dinners at the Bush Street mansion. All had ties to Rock Springs. All were men who had profited from the massacre of Chinese miners. Yet each account lacked proof, and no one could locate the mansion on any map or in any directory. The Golden Gate Supper Club had become a ghost. The 5th death was Charles Pemberton, a banker who had funded the violence in Wyoming. His final dinner lasted 12 courses, each more intricate than the last. Chen Huang described each ingredient in the style of a medical lecture, noting its traditional use in Chinese medicine. Pemberton listened with fascination, unaware that the lecture also described the symptoms that would claim his life within 48 hours. The combination of poisons used was subtle and deadly, a perfect culmination of the knowledge and patience honed over years. Even as the deaths continued, the men maintained the appearance of ordinary lives. Lin Wei polished silver in mansions, Chen Huang assisted physicians, Jiang Min ran his shop, Wu Jian drafted blueprints, and Liu Feng tutored children. To the outside world they were invisible, ordinary, and compliant, yet behind closed doors they orchestrated retribution with the precision of master strategists. By late 1893 the number of victims had grown to 9. It was then that Detective William McBride began to notice the anomalies. He had lost his own brother to a sudden illness, one of the club's victims. Suspicious of the coincidences, he started to investigate the so-called Golden Gate Supper Club, tracing invitations, interviewing servants and questioning associates. But when he searched city records, directories, and social columns, there was no mention of the club. Membership cards, when found, were blank. Menus varied from dinner to dinner. Witnesses described different locations, different cuisines, different seating arrangements. McBride realized he was chasing ghosts. The tension among the 5 founders increased. They knew that each death brought them closer to discovery. Each dinner was planned with greater attention to detail. Wu Jian improved the ventilation to ensure no lingering odor could be detected. Jiang Min refined his poisons to leave no trace, and Liu Feng rehearsed distractions to keep conversations away from sensitive topics. Lin Wei oversaw every aspect, his calm exterior masking the complexity of their orchestration. Chen Huang continued to refine his knowledge of symptom progression, ensuring each victim's death would appear natural and untraceable. By this point, the Golden Gate Supper Club had transcended its appearance as a simple dining society. It was an instrument of justice, though judged outside any moral framework that the public would recognize. Each member of the elite who attended dined not just on exquisite food, but on the illusions of safety, arrogance, and superiority, the very traits that allowed the 5 men to exact their vengeance. Throughout 1894, as the final target approached, the city of San Francisco remained oblivious. The newspapers reported occasional deaths with brief obituaries, none mentioning the dinners or the mansion. Families mourned quietly, never suspecting the calculated design behind each tragedy. Yet the archives, hidden and incomplete, later revealed the meticulous records left by the 5 men. Handwritten notes described the psychological states of each victim, the precise sequence of courses, and the expected outcomes. These journals were intended to serve as both confession and warning, a testament to the careful planning of vengeance executed by those whom history had ignored. And so the stage was set for the final dinner. Augustus Crane, the railroad baron who had ordered the massacre, had survived while the others had fallen. Paranoid and wary, he believed himself untouchable, yet the 5 men whose lives had been destroyed in Wyoming knew that even Crane could not escape the careful orchestration of justice that had been 12 years in the making. The mansion awaited him. The crimson invitations were prepared. The poisons and precautions were perfected. What followed at the Last Supper would not only complete their cycle of vengeance, but also leave a mark on history, one that the city's records would attempt to erase, one that would eventually surface decades later in a forgotten vault beneath the Hall of Justice. By early 1894, the Golden Gate Supper Club had become both legend and shadow. The mansion on Bush Street was no longer merely a venue, it had become a theater of inevitability, where each dinner was a carefully choreographed act, and each guest a character in a drama of retribution. The 5 men, Lin Wei, Chen Huang, Zhang Min, Wu Jian, and Liu Feng, moved through their roles with unwavering precision. Each course, each gesture, each word was designed to mask intention while delivering consequence. The next deaths were calculated with extraordinary care. Every poison had a timetable, every symptom a subtle progression that would appear natural to the city's physicians. Death number 6 occurred during a summer dinner when a former railroad executive slumped over his chair after tasting a specially prepared consommé. The physician noted apoplexy. The family wept quietly, unaware of the deliberate precision that had led to this moment. Death number 7 followed months later during a dinner with imported wines and delicacies from Canton. This time, the victim, a banker with ties to multiple railroad enterprises, suffered a sudden fever and delirium. Chen Huang had hidden a small dose of belladonna within the herb garnish. The man's final hours were described as peaceful but brief, yet in the private journals of the supper club, the record was clear. The death was calculated to maximize both surprise and inevitability. By the 9th death, the attention of Detective William McBride had intensified. His own brother had been among the victims, and the pattern, though subtle, could no longer be ignored. McBride scoured the city, attempting to trace the Golden Gate Supper Club, but the mansion's location shifted with each dinner. Invitations bore no fixed address, and each witness offered contradictory recollections of the menu and decor. It was as if the club existed outside of time and space, a phantom of silk and candlelight. Meanwhile, the 5 men continued to refine their approach. Lin Wei meticulously trained the serving staff to deliver each dish with precise timing. Chen Huang monitored the physiological effects of the poisons, ensuring that each symptom would mimic a natural illness. Zhang Min perfected the recipes, blending flavors to conceal the lethal additives. Wu Jian tested the mansion's infrastructure, verifying that no drafts, odors, or physical traces could betray the plan. Liu Feng orchestrated entertainment, weaving poetry and music to distract and soothe, lulling the victims into confidence. Each dinner became more elaborate than the last. 12 courses, imported ingredients, exotic wines, and rituals drawn from Chinese tradition, but always adapted to Western tastes. Guests admired the opulence, feeling privileged to witness such a spectacle. They had no idea that every glass they lifted, every morsel they consumed, was an instrument of their judgment. The final months before the last target were a delicate balance of observation and calculation. Augustus Crane, the railroad baron who had ordered the Rock Springs Massacre, had watched the others fall. Paranoia had made him cautious, yet he remained unaware that every move, every gesture, every whisper of the city's elite was being observed, analyzed, and recorded by men he had once considered beneath him. The Fifth Founder's journals detail these dinners with the precision of surgeons, menus annotated with dosage, seating charts marked with subtle symbols, timing of ingestion noted down to the minute. They recorded the victims' reactions, noting color, temperature, pulse, and mannerisms. Every death was an experiment in discipline and patience, a culmination of years spent mastering subtlety and control. Finally, in late 1894, the stage was set for the ultimate reckoning. Augustus Crane received his invitation. Crimson paper, gold leaf, a single signature. He hesitated, suspecting danger, but curiosity and arrogance outweighed caution. Lin Wei awaited him in the foyer, immaculate in dress and calm demeanor. Chen Huang greeted him with polite deference, explaining the cultural significance of each dish. Zhang Min prepared a meal designed to strike with invisible precision. Wu Jian observed silently, ready to intervene, and Liu Feng orchestrated conversation, keeping Crane's mind occupied. The trap was exact. The poison was in the invitation itself, a slow-acting, undetectable compound absorbed through handling. As Crane sat at the head of the table, his confidence only deepened. By the time he raised the first glass, his body had already begun to betray him. Muscle weakness crept through his limbs, subtle tremors masked by posture and bravado. Each course advanced the symptoms, mimicking natural illness while intensifying internal effects. The 5 men confronted him finally, revealing their identities and explaining the deaths of the 12 men who had profited from massacre. Crane's outrage was immediate. He reached for a hidden pistol, but his body betrayed him. Paralysis, induced by the invitation's poison, rendered him incapable of firing. Slowly, inexorably, he experienced the combined effects of the toxins that had ended the lives of his associates. Each pain, each spasmodic twitch, was a message from the men he had wronged. As he succumbed, Lin Wei recited the names of the victims from Rock Springs, recounting each life extinguished, each family destroyed. The other 4 men ensured that the death was prolonged enough for acknowledgement, yet precise enough to leave no forensic trace beyond the mansion's walls. Augustus Crane, once untouchable, died fully awed, that vengeance had been delivered with the patience and precision denied him by the law he had manipulated. By morning, the mansion was empty. The 5 men left no sign of their presence. No servants, no notes, no trace remained beyond the records they had kept in their private journals. The city, oblivious, continued its rhythm of wealth and expansion, unaware of the phantom society that had executed justice with silent calculation. Detective McBride, arriving too late, found only a single crimson envelope on the mahogany sideboard, its contents detailing the lives lost, the crimes committed, and the meticulous orchestration of punishment. The Golden Gate Supper Club had vanished as completely as it had appeared. The journals, eventually discovered decades later, offered the first comprehensive evidence of a vigilante campaign carried out in the shadows of opulence. The murders were over. The revenge was complete. But in the silence that followed, the question lingered. Was this justice, or was it murder carried out with the precision of historians? The answer rested only in the journals, sealed and hidden, awaiting rediscovery by those willing to confront the shadows of history. By the spring of 1893, Detective William McBride had become consumed by the string of mysterious deaths connected to San Francisco's elite. Each victim shared a history with Rock Springs, Wyoming, and each had attended the Golden Gate Supper Club, though no trace of such a society could be found in any city directory or social registry. McBride pored over coroner's reports, interviewed servants and porters, and traced invitations, but every lead dissolved into contradiction. Witnesses remembered different locations, menus, and seating arrangements. The mansion itself seemed to move, as if it existed only when needed and vanished immediately afterward. McBride began to understand that he was chasing ghosts, yet the detective was driven by personal grief. His younger brother, Thomas McBride, had been one of the club's victims, stricken by a sudden fever and pronounced dead of natural causes. The pain sharpened his resolve. He examined the journals left behind by the 5 men, recovered from the mansion months after the last dinner. Though incomplete and fragmented, they hinted at a system, an orchestrated cycle of retribution carried out with surgical precision. Despite these hints, legal proof remained elusive. The city of San Francisco had no record of the mansion under any known name. Invitations bore only gold calligraphy and cryptic phrases, "By invitation of the founders." Membership cards were blank, and every servant or witness spoke differently, their recollections colored by fear, confusion, or loyalty. McBride realized that he was confronting not merely a crime, but an elaborate illusion designed to frustrate investigation. Meanwhile, the five men prepared for the final act. Augustus Crane, the railroad baron who had ordered the Rock Springs Massacre, had observed the deaths of his associates and had grown both paranoid and defiant. He understood, at least vaguely, that the deaths were no accident, yet his pride and arrogance convinced him that he could evade the shadow that haunted him. He received his final invitation in late 1894. A crimson envelope, sealed in gold leaf, marked with the emblem of the Golden Gate Supper Club. The day of the last dinner arrived. The mansion gleamed in the late afternoon sun, its interior meticulously arranged for the final confrontation. Lin Wei stood at the entrance, impeccably dressed, his calm demeanor concealing the precision of the evening's plan. Chen Huang greeted Crane with polite formalities, explaining the significance of each course and subtly narrating the medicinal properties of the dishes. Jiang Min moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing meals laced with subtle, undetectable toxins. Wu Jian oversaw lighting, ventilation, and security, ensuring no misstep could reveal their intentions. Liu Feng performed music and recited poetry, drawing Crane's attention and easing his suspicion. Crane entered, aware of potential danger but determined to assert dominance. He attempted to conceal a small revolver, believing that his wealth and cunning would protect him. Yet he was already compromised. The invitation itself carried a hidden poison, absorbed through contact with the paper, initiating paralysis and progressive neurological failure. The toxins Lin Wei, Chen Huang, and Jiang Min had perfected over years of experimentation began their work before Crane could raise his weapon. As the dinner progressed, the five men revealed themselves, confronting Crane with the full history of Rock Springs. They recited the names of each victim, recounting the families destroyed, the homes burned, and the calculated deaths that had followed. Crane attempted to strike, but his body betrayed him, trembling and weakening under the slow paralysis that rendered his revolver useless. Pain crept rough his muscles, spasms and cramps mirroring the combined effects of the poisons that had felled his associates. Over the course of the evening, Crane experienced every method the five men had employed in previous dinners. He felt the cardiac strain induced in Whitmore, the fevers that afflicted the banker, and the subtle neurological disturbances designed for others. Each sensation was both punishment and message, a full reckoning for the massacre he had ordered nearly a decade prior. The experience was prolonged, precise, and intentional, leaving him conscious of his fate until the final breath. By dawn, Augustus Crane was dead. The five men quietly dismantled the scene. All utensils, records, and traces of poison were removed. The mansion was left as though no dinner had occurred. No servant, no neighbor, no passerby observed their departure. The Golden Gate Supper Club had completed its final act, leaving the city to continue oblivious to the phantom justice that had been carried out in its midst. The following day, an anonymous package arrived at the offices of the San Francisco Chronicle. Inside were complete records of the Rock Springs Massacre, detailed confessions of the 12 deaths, photographs of the five men with their families before the tragedy, and meticulously written journals chronicling each dinner, each course, and each victim. A final note in Chen Huang's hand read, "We are not murderers. We are the consequence of murder unpunished." Public debate erupted. Some hailed the five men as heroes, delivering justice where the law had failed. Others condemned them as cold-blooded murderers, unbound by morality or restraint. Detective McBride closed the case as unsolved, but privately he understood the meticulous justice that had been carried out and felt a measure of sympathy for the architects of vengeance. The five men were never found. Weeks later, a ship manifest listed 5 Chinese names departing from San Francisco to ports in southern China: Lin Wei, Chen Huang, Jiang Min, Wu Jian, and Liu Feng. Their disappearance suggested that justice had been completed and their mission concluded. The mansion on Bush Street fell into decay, and the Golden Gate Supper Club was erased from memory, existing only in whispers, fragments of journals, and the suppressed vault discovered decades later. Some secrets, buried in the archives and in the shadows of a city's opulence, may never be fully revealed. The 5 men returned to the lands of their birth, leaving behind a history of vengeance meticulously executed and a haunting question. When justice is denied by law, what lengths will the wronged go to reclaim it? What do you think of this story? Was everything truly revealed? Leave your thoughts below. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share with someone who loves dark mysteries. The Golden Gate Supper Club remains a cautionary tale, a testament to precision, patience, and the hidden power of those history tries to forget.